Alrighty, we are recording. Welcome back to the Ape podcast. I'm sitting here with my brother, David Williams.
Hey.
I just released a conversation with Mr. Josh Bell that we know.
Yeah.
He's a fitness guru, has a lot of strengths to him. And really what I'm trying to do with, and at least those who have been following, I created the podcast only a few months ago, and I'm producing two primary pieces of content. The first part is podcast discussions. So finding fellow Americans to talk about the future of America, whether that is culture, politics, philosophy, doesn't matter, right? Yeah. While in parallel, I am trying to contribute something positive. So in the process of holding these discussions, I am aiming for 100 interviews with successful Americans, because as critical as I am of various philosophies and politics out there, I also want to offer something, an alternative path, something more productive for the next generation of Americans.
Makes sense.
So I'm looking to interview people in all sorts of careers, people who took all sorts of different paths to finding success. Every successful person inevitably went through failures, very likely found advice through someone. Oh, yeah. But really I'm directing this message, let's say, to young Americans or teenagers to help them figure out what career path they want to go down, if they want to go to school or not. Because as we both know, you don't have to go to school to be successful.
Absolutely.
And what best practices they took to find success.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a good mission as well.
Yeah. So, and usually the best way I want to start these is getting an idea of your career, right? Yeah. So you are 27, yep. Right? You found success, like I said, you went through your own issues and challenges, just like myself, just like everyone else. Yep. But you found a career that you enjoy, yeah, right? So
I love it.
Tell us about that. What is a solution engineer? Yeah. Did you stumble into that? Were you very intentional getting into that? Or let's start with that.
Yeah. And I think you're very right that there is a common denominator between a lot of successful folks, American, non-American, and it is that you find a point in your life at which you determine, okay, I don't want this, I want more. So how that kind of leads into me becoming a solutions engineer. So first off, solutions engineer, think of that as a technical sales individual. There's many names for it in the industry: solutions engineer, solutions consultant, systems engineers, you name it, right? But at the end of the day, it is different names to basically explain the same thing. You are a sales individual at heart, but you approach selling whatever your product is, typically software for solutions engineer, you approach selling it from a consultative technical background. So in software sales, you have two main individuals that spearhead a sales cycle. You have the account executive, which is yourself, and then you have a solutions engineer. The account executive is that individual who typically, wears the tie, wears the suit, bridges the relationships because they're good with people, they're good with understanding business. The solutions engineer is the essentially other side to that sword, because what we do is we are still selling nonetheless. There's a few different schools of thought on that, but at the end of the day, how we sell is by selling the technical value of our software to the customer. So what we do is I essentially, in the sales process, I like to think of it as a four-legged relay race. The first leg is going to be the account executive building the relationship with a prospect, getting us a foot in the door. Then when it comes to the second leg, the AE, account executive, hands the baton to the solutions consultant. The solution consultant then begins to really dive deep into what is it that is the challenge of the prospect, but not just business challenges, the technical challenge. There's a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of different software. There's a lot of different pieces to that puzzle. Not everything connects. Not everything talks. So my particular piece in that second leg of the race is really understanding the challenge that a prospect is having from the technical nature. Why is it that they're looking at a different software from what they're using today? And then once I fully understand the challenge, and that's very important, we'll come back to that, but once I fully understand the challenge and the problem, the third leg of the race is me then creating a demonstration from our software. I basically configure it to make it essentially fit the use cases that I consultatively believe will solve the challenge of the prospect. Not always guaranteed, but it is my iteration of how we as a software vendor can solve the challenge of the prospect. And so what I do is I configure it, put it into a demonstration. Think about high school, college. You give a presentation at the end of the semester. All the research you've done, you're doing a presentation in your slide deck. The only difference is that there is no teacher that has a grading criteria and an answer. You're talking to a prospect who doesn't know the answer. So it's really down to how well can you iterate that you can solve the problem. So I do that in a demonstration. I do that in several conversations with their technical individuals who will be using the software. Once that third leg of the race is done, the final piece is if they say that, you know what, yes, this software definitely looks like it's going to work. It definitely seems like it's going to solve the challenge. That's where I put the baton back in the account executive's hand to take us through the rest of the race and get that deal done. So that's essentially what we do, and multiple schools of thought, but that's the main thing.
Yeah, well, and I like how you ended it too. There's multiple schools of thought because with, the career of sales in general, you could sell real estate, you could sell financial services, you can sell shoes, you can sell cars. There's all sorts of different products or services that you can sell. And I think what's unique to our field is we are it's a relatively new industry, at least in the past 20 years, but we are in the software as a service space, right? So for those of you who are tuning in, if we think about a large company, I always like to use the example of Nike, right? Nike has thousands upon thousands of employees, right? Each of those employees need a laptop. Each of those employees need some sort of tools or software and even a desk to effectively be productive and do their job. Doesn't matter if they're in sales, doesn't matter if they're in IT, doesn't matter if they're in marketing. And a lot of and what we sell is, again, software as a service. So if we think about those employees, they have a laptop, they need to log into some sort of software, whether that's accessing their benefits, whether that is accessing employee services that they need to request, whether that is logging into, let's say, like a marketing software such as Adobe, right? We know people who work at Adobe. But really, Nike is responsible for ensuring that all of their employees are productive, and those employees require software to be productive. Correct. So if we think about the CEO of Nike, who I actually don't know who that is right now.
John Donahoe. He actually coincidentally was the CEO of the company I used to work for, so quite familiar.
It's funny how you hear a lot of the same names, especially on the upper leadership side. But it's John Donahue's primary responsibility to ensure productivity, right? So, although it costs, let's say, $1 million to purchase software licenses for his IT team, for example, that's $1 million that they have to spend. You're usually hesitant to spend $1 million, but you'll do it if it's going to help you be more productive or if it's going to help you get a better ROI on your marketing, on your supply chain, whatever the software solves as a problem, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and my one of the age-old sayings or sound bites that I love is, how do you sell $1 million worth of software? And it's you solve a $2 million problem. Yeah. So at the end of the day, money needs to be spent to solve a problem. So what value are you providing from your software, whether that is the ability to consolidate spend, save money, or the ability to make money? Either way, money needs to be spent for money to be made or saved. Yeah. So we are the brokers of that transaction. We are the individuals providing that solution to help them do that.
Yeah. And the difference between because again, you could sell desks to Nike, right? Yeah. Seems simple. I mean, maybe it's not as simple as we think it is, but it becomes a lot more complicated when you're selling software because software, I'm not an engineer, right? So I don't fully understand how all the bells and whistles work necessarily, right? So usually just like when you're buying a car, if you're buying a car, your expectations aren't just to be told why you should buy the car. Yeah. You are being told, hey, here's the value on gasoline. Here is, typical savings you would spend if you're switching from driving your current SUV to potentially a crossover. Yeah. So there is benefits of using the software and making the purchase, but it's not as simple as just saying, okay, I like that, let me buy it. It's Correct. More of because again, selling software, you don't sell in one day, right? Yep. It could be over a year. It could take over a year of selling it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And part of why that process takes so long is because we are going in and solving a complex problem with software. So I guess in your perspective, like, what does that what does that look like in terms of problem solving and not just selling on the features and functions?
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very important point, right? People don't buy cool features. People buy value. And so when it comes to software, you're right. It's convoluted sometimes. It is complicated. It's not simple, right? If you don't have a t-shirt, you can go buy a t-shirt for $5. There's not a lot of thought that has to go into that, right? Sure, you could buy a t-shirt for $100, but why? You could buy a t-shirt for $5. So yeah. Same concept when it comes to software. There's a lot of software out there, and especially software as a service, which, if you want, we can break down that business model, which is inherently different from, older ways of buying software. But at the end of the day, there's software out there that is equivalent to the $5 t-shirt, right? You could buy a small piece of software that solves a very specific problem. But why would you buy software that is 10 times the price of that? But it is because that software that is 10 times the cost will solve potentially 20 times the problems. So the concept for where we come in is because of the fact that software is complicated, we are talking to the IT folks a lot of the times, at least in my realm. You're talking to folks that are on the infrastructure side of things, the people that are actually touching the materials needed to provide those services to the employees. And the reason it can take so long is because if you're spending $1 million, that's not something that your average manager or director or even VP can just say, yep, I'm gonna spend $1 million. Even Nike, billions and billions and billions in revenue. I would encourage you to try to find a director that has the ability to just sign $1 million contract without talking to anybody. There's a lot of different what we call stakeholders involved in the matter, right? So there's definitely the factor of checks and balances, but there's also the case of each different stakeholder, which is essentially different folks who have an opinion in the deal, right? You don't need a unanimous yes, but you need a majority yes. So what we typically do, and this kind of relates to how you and I do our selling and what makes us successful, is we start to understand, well, who are the stakeholders involved in this particular process, this particular sales process, meaning who are the people that this deal matters. This piece of software is going to affect them in one way or another. And then we go and learn what is it that's important to each of them. What are each of their problems? Sometimes they have the same problems as the other stakeholders. Oftentimes they have different problems, and oftentimes they have different preferences. A lot of different variables that go into it. But at the end of the day, a very succinct way of thinking it is people don't buy just for the sake of buying. They buy to solve a problem. So the more that we can articulate how our technology, software, hardware, whatever, solves everybody's problems, the easier it's going to be for them to say, yep, this is what we want. And even if they're spending $1 million, if we can prove to them that we're saving them $2 million, we're going to help them earn $3 million, doesn't really seem like that big of a deal to spend $1 million, does it? But that is where we have to come in and be able to articulate that.
Yeah, and that just reminded me, because one of the major hurdles that we run into selling software is if we're working with, let's say, a VP at, again, Nike, we'll keep on that example. If we're working with a VP, it's not him spending his own money to buy this thing, but it is him spending the company's money to make his life easier.
Yep.
Or if he doesn't, his life's going to be harder.
He may be fired.
Exactly. So exactly, because because let's say his CEO tasks him with saying, hey, we have $1 million, we're going to spend it to improve IT operations, for example. And if he, goes with the cheaper vendor or decides, okay, well, that's good enough, let's move forward with it, it's going to take a year or so or less to implement that software. And if he decided to go with a potential vendor that isn't as, suitable to their needs, doesn't have that quality of support, I mean, a bunch of things can go wrong.
Yeah.
That VP, who again, he didn't spend a single dollar of his own money, could be fired because that bad decision that he made can impact the company by millions, correct?
Yep. And that is hitting on the point that there's going to be value that the business looks for, but there's also personal value of the individuals that are buying. You're not selling to the machine that is Nike. You're selling to the folks who work for Nike. And those folks, on top of whatever their company initiatives are, have their own personal reasons for going with a vendor, whether it's solving the thing that the company needs them to solve, or it's some other reason that's going to help their lives be easier. But at the end of the day, like, and part of what I do to help articulate, which we can talk through later, is I'm a big analogy guy. So the way I like to think of it is, if you think very surface level about solving a challenge, it's like, okay, I have this problem. Here's a cheap way of solving it. Cool, let's go with that. You're effectively saying, hey, I have this hemorrhaging wound. Let me just put a Band-Aid on it, right? You put a Band-Aid on a wound that is,
solution.
It's called a Band-Aid solution, right? Because you're effectively saying, well, this surface level wound is bleeding. So if I put a Band-Aid on the surface level, that should solve it. Incorrect. What you're doing is essentially maybe relieving some symptoms of the wound at the time, but the root cause of the issue is still there. So therefore, even if a day you stop bleeding, 2 days later, you're going to keep bleeding through that Band-Aid. And then you're going to have to buy another Band-Aid, and then another Band-Aid. And then eventually you're going to get in trouble because you've bought way too many Band-Aids. And at the end of the day, you got to remove all those Band-Aids to now diagnose what the root cause of that, and then go spend more money to actually provide a suture.
Which you could have done
Could have
the
been
first
prevented.
time if
Yep.
you were thorough,
Correct.
you were dialed. Yeah.
Correct.
Exactly.
And not that it's a misconception, but there is a common case that we find in software sales where the buyer, those stakeholders that we were talking about, they are looking at solutions as Band-Aids, and they're not as necessarily looking at the root cause of the issue. So they see something that's shiny and cool features, and they see cheap price tags and whatnot. And they're like, that's it. You know, like I'm going to save my company a ton of money. Well, what happens is, if we as sellers do not educate them on the consequences of the future issues of going with the Band-Aid, then essentially we are missing out on us as an organization earning their business, and we're missing out on the opportunity to solve a challenge for this prospect or customer. And for me as an individual, my philosophy for selling is I'm here to solve challenges, right? It's not me versus the customer's expectation to get the deal done. It's me plus the customer against the problem that they have. And if I can focus on solving their problem, then signing a contract with my company is simply a means to the end. But we've agreed that this is the outcome we want to work on together, and we're going to get there together. It's no longer a battle. It's a collaboration.
Yeah. And you know, speaking of analogies, I always think that a good analogy is, if there's any homeowners out there and you have a potential leak in your home, there's a $50 plumber and there's a $300 plumber.
Yeah.
Hey, the $50 plumber, maybe he'll be here in an hour, right? And you're only spending $50. That sounds nice, right? Yeah. But let's say he doesn't do a good job. The leak starts to continue. The leak gets worse. All of a sudden, that, you know, couple $100 you could have spent on the let's say better plumber, could now is potentially a multi-$1,000 problem that you are really gonna wish you addressed it more thoroughly the first time.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's everything has pros and cons. Everything has trade-off. Exactly. Right. And you could look at things simply and, you know, say, okay, I see this immediate problem. Let me just go with a quick resolution. Sometimes quick, sometimes free isn't the best, right? You could go to a furniture store, spend $10,000 on a couch, or down the street, somebody put a free sign on a couch. That's free. Do you want that couch?
Yeah.
Obviously no. But why is that? Because you don't want a couch that has been sitting out in the cold and, you know, got all these germs and whatnot on it, and it doesn't match your. It's like you're getting no value out of it, but it's free, right? Yeah. So that's the same concept here. Is like cheaper doesn't mean better, and so in software, cheaper doesn't mean better. Cheaper means that you may solve the problem today, but create 3 more tomorrow.
Yeah.
And our job is to help them see that and help them identify that the right solution can prevent future issues, and hopefully, as a bonus, the right solution is our solution that we're selling.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I guess, so taking a step back, just a quick summary for, again, I mean, you and me, we've been living in the software world since we graduated college.
Oh, yeah.
Not a lot of people know about it.
We've been in this together for a while.
Yeah. And so just to summarize it, so, you know, being a software salesperson in general, you are working with buyers at certain companies who are given permission to spend money to solve a certain problem. They work with folks like us to say, hey, I have this problem. I've been given the okay to spend $1 million to fix it. What's the best way of going about this to minimize the downtime, to minimize the amount of work we have to do, let's say, while not just going the quick, cheap, easy route. Exactly. And that really, that embodies a lot of the account executive position, which is something that I'm in and I've been doing for years. Yet someone like me, I mean, I can't even set up my printer. You know what I mean? So I'm not, although I sell software, I'm not a technically savvy individual. Yeah. And that's where I would loop in someone like yourself who doesn't just know the technology, but you have to have business acumen, and you have to have, because just the way that I see it, just from my experiences, a lot of people in the solution engineering role come from engineering roles, come from very technically heavy code backgrounds.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the best solution engineer.
Correct.
And I always felt that you stood out from your peers because you not just only had the technical knowledge, but you had business acumen and had that type of EQ. So,
Correct.
what would you recommend for people out there considering getting into a solution engineering role? Is there certain skills they should have? Are there certain things that they, maybe you enjoy teaching, you enjoy building teams? Or what type of traits would you say kids should be looking out for to help them determine if solution engineering is good for them?
Yeah. Definitely a multi-pronged answer. And I'll start by saying that you're absolutely right. Just because you start out in engineering doesn't necessarily qualify you as a solutions engineer. And that's why even if my title, on my LinkedIn is solutions engineer, I really think of myself as a consultant, right? And that was actually my first title, solution consultant, because I consult on the right solutions. So I actually think that's a bit more fitting because I don't have an engineering degree. I don't have a computer science degree. I have a marketing degree. I don't know how to code, but that's not necessary, right? Because if you think about it, you drive a car at 15. Do you know how to build an engine? No, but you know how to use the car to get the value of what you need, right? And so as a car salesman, you don't have to know how to build a car to sell a car, right? So I take that and apply that to mine. That's an oversimplification, but really think of solutions engineering as the bridge between engineers and business, right? Because solutions engineers, I like to think of, are on a spectrum between those that are incredibly technical, so those with technical backgrounds, engineering backgrounds who can do the coding, and then those who are more business-minded, where maybe they're not as savvy with the technology, but they're really able to explain the value of technology. They can give a pretty kick-ass demo. And then you have those in the middle, which is where I see myself, where I have an aptitude for learning the technology. I enjoy learning technology. I just have a curious mindset, right? If I click a button, I'm like, why did that work? How did that happen, right? That's just something that my mind gravitates towards. It wasn't always that way, but that is a way that my mind thinks. And so being in the center of that, I have an aptitude for learning technology. I don't have to know how to build it to know how to use it. And then I take my aptitude for business to say, okay, based on how I've understood this technology, here's how I can apply that and solve somebody else's problem, right? Because each customer, each prospect is unique. Their challenges are unique. So I can't use the same cookie cutter solutions for every prospect. I have to be able to be nimble enough with the solutions and the ways that I go about the use cases so that it fits for different customers at the end of the day. So along the way, you get more technical along the way, and there's things you learn, but I really want to hone in that solutions engineering, you don't have to have a degree. I don't have a computer science degree. I said, I don't no MIS degree. I don't know how to code, but I know how to use technology. And I've done it for years now to where if I pick up a new technology, I'm going to figure it out pretty freaking quick. Yeah. And it's just because I'm curious, right? I like to click around, see what things are, and then I can piece it together and articulate how this would apply to each individual. So that's really the understanding of the solutions engineer, and probably could have mentioned that in the beginning, but I think that's a really good way to think of it, is that bridge between engineering and business. To the second part there is, it's hard to say what common denominators there are that people can look for or maybe strive for to become a solution consultant, because there are so many different types of individuals in the role. Oh, yeah. So like I said, there's going to be multiple schools of thought. Some folks like to say that you need to be super technically savvy. You need to be, one with the technology. I got to know how to build this thing from the ground up. And some will say you don't need to know any of that, but you have to know how to say the right things to get to the right folks. So it depends, right? Because you have a lot of introverts that are solution consultants. They started out as engineers. They started out as folks working on the technical side, and then they realized I know how to use this inside and out. I know it like the back of the hand. So it only makes sense that if I were to talk to another buyer, I would be able to articulate how they would use this. Great. Because if you're talking to an IT guy and you were an IT guy before, you have a unique perspective, right? You know what it's like to come from that realm. And so that does help. But then there are folks that are more extroverted. I like to consider myself more extroverted. Like, I like talking, I like teaching, I like making new friends. I do it because I like it. And, for me, the way that I approach it is, from an extroverted standpoint, I'm not ever going to try to relate with a buyer from, if you use this API and you use this, here's a really cool thing you can do. Like, I don't have the knowledge to do that. But what I do have the knowledge of is, hey, these are the challenges that you're sharing with me that you're facing. I have an understanding of the technology just because of the time that I've spent in the industry. So I have an idea as to what you're talking about, but I don't have to go into the deep weeds of the technology to say, look, the challenge you're sharing with me is X. The solutions that I'm providing is going to solve X. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go any more complicated than that, right? You don't have a way to go 10 miles to work. I give you a bike. Cool. There's a solution. Do I have to tell you about, the inner workings of the bike? Do I have to tell you about the metal used in the spokes? No. My favorite sales analogy is when people don't buy a drill because of the 4-inch rubber handle and the 3-inch plated steel and the hair trigger. No, people buy a drill to drill a hole. So I don't talk about all the features of the drill and hope that the buyer is going to connect the value of why this drill is worth 10 times the other drill. Yeah. I'm going to showcase that the outcome, the only thing that matters, solving their problem, is something that not only can our drill solve, but we're going to solve it better than the next drill.
Yeah. So you're a problem solver, not an engineer.
I'm not an engineer. I'm a problem solver. And that applies to...
people really get that wrong in the SE role, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because some people spend so much time trying to make the perfect little demos and trying to make the software do all these really cool, creative things.
Go through their script.
Their script. But it's like, people don't care about all the cool things that you think are cool. This is the first time they're seeing something this complicated. Their minds are going to be so inundated with information that they're going to retain 15%. Like that's what I believe. When I typically give 90-minute demonstrations. So imagine a 90-minute presentation at the end of your semester, 90 freaking minutes. Do you think that the buyers are paying full attention for 90 minutes? Hell no. Yeah. So what I do is I make it interesting. What I do is I don't show them all these cool little bells and whistles that I care about. I focus on what they care about. And the only way I do that is by really understanding their problem, not by understanding all the inner workings of my technology, but understanding their problem and how I can provide the simplest way to solve their problem with our technology.
Yeah.
So
you're consulting, not demoing.
I'm consulting. I'm not constructing.
Yeah.
I'm consulting. I'm not engineering. And that's why I call myself a consultant.
Yeah. So what would you say, and before, because I want to wrap up on basically the solution engineering career, and then we'll jump into how did you even get into that?
Yeah.
What would you say for the audience is the good, the bad, and the ugly of the SC career?
Yeah. Depends. How much time do you have? So there's pros and cons with any profession. I would say the things that let me start with what could be perceived as the ugly, right? You are, depending on the company you're at, you are looked at and this may be harsh, but you are looked at as a tool in the sales process, right? You're looked at not as the co-seller, but you're looked at as one of the instruments used to complete the sale, right? In other aspects, so that's just more from like a philosophical standpoint, depending on what you want.
Most employees in general
some people don't care, right?
Yeah,
some people are like, hey, I want to do my 9 to 5 and I'm out. I don't. Other than that, some of the other cons is it is a never-ending journey. Yeah. So and I'm gonna share why I say this, but you will never, depending on the complexity of the product that you're selling, you will never understand everything. You will never know every use case. You will never know every little cool feature and whatnot. So sometimes that can be daunting, right? Like I need to go talk to a C-suite, and I do this all the time. I need to go talk to a chief technology officer of a multi-billion-dollar company. This person has decades of experience on me. This person knows more than I'll ever know about technology. And I have to go in front of this person and convince them that not only do I know what the heck I'm talking about, but that my solution is going to be better what they could have come up with on their own. Sometimes that can be daunting. So there is that mindset aspect of it, which I'm sure we're going to get into. So the final piece I'll say is that, it doesn't, on the con side, is that it can lead down so many paths that are way outside of your job description, right? Like as a solution consultant, I am brought into so many different areas that have nothing to do with my job. But at the end of the day, on the flip side, I'm a problem solver. Yeah. So if I'm brought in to work with the team that's actually, building the dream that I'm painting, I'm going to have to get pulled in and help sort things out. Sometimes I have to get involved with other teams like pricing, the sales team, developers, whatnot. Like there are so many hats that you have to wear that oftentimes the job description that they put, that's kind of just like what they have to put to have a job description and give you a general sense of where you're going to go. Yeah. But you get pulled in so many different directions that it can be hard to manage all that. So there could be cons, and I guess that's how I see it applied to the most general population. But on the flip side, I look at some of those as pros. Like, I don't want to stop learning. Like, I don't want to be in a job where after 3 to 6 months of onboarding, I know everything I need to know. Yeah. Because then what? For the next 30 years of my career, I know exactly how to do it. Think of like the olden days of the assembly line worker for putting cars together, right? Your job got so specialized that you crank this bolt, and that is your job for 8 hours a day. Like you could figure that shit out super quick. But man, that would drive me crazy. So like for me in particular, I don't want that. Like I want something that's going to be fulfilling. I want something that's going to challenge me, not make me rip my hair out, but challenging, right? So you're always learning something new, whether you're learning technology, whether you're learning business, whether you're learning how to communicate. I think that's the biggest takeaway I've ever gotten from this career is I have learned how to far more effectively communicate, and we'll get to that. But there's so many pros to never ending with the learning, so many pros to the never ending learning. Yeah. And then the other aspect is you can do anything you want after. I truly believe that. Like you can do anything you want after becoming a solution consultant because sales in general, it teaches you so much. But solution consulting in particular puts your fingers in so many different aspects of business that if I want to go be a product manager, work on the product side of things, if I want to work my way into sales, if I want to work my way into pretty much just about anything, I can. And the underlying reason why I can is because of the mindset that I have adopted when becoming a solution consultant. Yeah. I've learned how to learn. I've learned how to solve problems. So that means I can now solve my own problems, which has been very effective for me. Yeah. So lots of pros, lots of cons, and it can be quite lucrative. Like there is something to be said about that. It can be quite lucrative.
Yeah, and I would say that you're a pretty social person as well, because we know plenty of engineers, and many of these engineers can go a week or more without even talking to someone at their own company if they work virtual, right? Yep. And the beauty of sales, specifically, let's say field sales is what we call it, is you get to shake hands with people, you get to meet CEOs, you get to meet CTOs, you get to host them at, we did a Dodgers game a couple months ago. We've done events.
We've taken people to dinner. We have taken C-suite to dinner. We have
on the company's credit card.
On the company's dime. Yeah, we've gone to restaurants we would never pay for ourselves.
We've never been to.
Yeah, we've been exactly. There's so much opportunity. Yeah. So much. If you make it. If you make it that way.
Yeah. And really the strength of that is like you get to if you enjoy being personable, because again, we have engineering friends who prefer to be left alone and do their work, and they do great jobs at it. We on our ourselves, I think I go a little crazy when I don't have enough people to talk to. I don't have enough meetings on my calendar. So I enjoy the handshaking. I don't know what the word I'm thinking of is, but interacting with people. Human interaction, I think, is
interpersonal relationships.
There you go. Yeah. So that's I think underappreciated, but one of the major reasons why I would recommend a young adult get into sales or solution consulting.
Absolutely. I think if you don't know what you want to do, it's tough. It is tough. It is a grind. It is something that is not for everybody. But if you can get into sales, any sort of entry level sales, you will learn more diverse skills than you will in what I believe any other job. And it's because you have to be diverse. You have to have so many facets to what you do that if you don't like it, no worries. You've picked up some skills that you can apply to other things: discipline, process orientation, detail orientation. And if you can make it, you're going to have a phenomenal career, and you're not going to work a day of your life because you're going to love every moment.
Yeah. So I always thought it was, I mean, it's not surprising to me, because I know that in the field of sales, I know great sales reps who have a nutrition degree, right?
Yeah.
And I believe out of high school, you initially were kinesiology major. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What made you go down that route, and how did you end up? What did you end up with? I know you mentioned marketing, and then how did that allow you to initiate your career in general?
Yeah, started out, I got into San Diego State University as a kinesiology major because we were athletes growing up. We had played competitive soccer our entire lives.
Had our injuries.
Had our injuries. I completely shredded one of my hamstrings in high school, so that took me out a year. But what I did was I started learning more about the body. So because we were always running, because we were always playing competitive sports, later I became obsessed with fitness, like working out and stuff. That was something where I thought, okay, if I can learn more about my body, you only get one, right? Yeah. You're going to have it the rest of your life. So the more you can know about it, the more you have the choice to do things that you want, right? You're arming yourself with information. I thought that might be a good idea for me. And so as soon as I got to college, though, I realized within the first semester of college, I don't actually have any interest in making this my profession. It's just it could be more of a hobby of mine, right?
It's a topic
I'm interested in, but it's not a passion. And there is a big difference between interest and passion, right? And so after the first semester, I basically was trying to determine, okay, well, I actually don't know what I want to do. And, you know, for anybody who is at that point where they don't know what they want to do, that's totally okay. Yeah. Like if you're in college, even if you're done with college, even if you've been in a career for 10 years, it's okay to not know. Like a lot of people are uncomfortable with the unknown. It's human nature. I'm uncomfortable with the unknown, but you get better at it over time. You get better at not being uncomfortable.
Get more courageous.
You accept the uncomfortability and you choose what you want to do with it. And so what I started to think about was, okay, I don't know what I want to do, so I want to try to get a career or get a degree that is going to be applicable in the most areas possible. So I knew I wanted to do something with business because I was like, hey, if I get a business degree, I can do anything. Even if I want to go into science later, I could probably figure it out. And so I learned about marketing because I actually talked to Ruby, our sister, about it. I remember this because she mentioned like, well, you know, marketing is something that a lot of people go into, and it's something where you talk to people all day. Because I told her, like, I don't really want to sit in front of a computer all day. You know, we grew up in a home with, I think, 4 kids all living at the same time. There was one computer, so I was never on the computer ever, which is ironic and funny now because I sell software, right? So, you know, I talked to her about it, and marketing was one of those things where, you know, it's got a lot of traits of things that I might want to do, even if I don't know if that's what I want to do. That's the degree that I'm going to go for. So, ended up choosing marketing as my major. Did an internship in marketing. I got one internship in marketing, which I have a funny story about how I got that, as you know. But I got one internship in marketing, and in the 3 months I did that, I hated just about every minute of it. But the key is you go for it, right? The key is you don't have to know what you want to do. You just got to pick something that seems like it's on the right path and go figure it out. Go try it. You need the experience.
Then you'll know if you don't like it.
Yeah, you'll know. And I didn't, you know, our family members aren't in marketing. Like I didn't know somebody in marketing. I didn't, you know, I didn't know somebody who could show me the ropes. And so what I did was I said, okay, like I need to go get experience. I need to see what it's all about. If I'm going to commit my life, my major to this, I should probably see if this is what I want to do. And so thank the Lord that I freaking did that internship, because I realized there's so much. I thought in reality, what I learned later is I wanted to do advertising. I've always thought advertising was interesting, right? Like I've always
to conduct business,
and
educate people. Yeah.
I always liked messaging. I always liked, you know, interacting with folks. I found that stuff fascinating, but marketing itself is a very different game these days. It's very, very great career. Like lots of people like it. It just wasn't for me. So, you know, I would say that's how I picked marketing. Was I wanted something that was going to be, applicable. I don't want to say generic, but applicable enough to where once I figured out what I did want to do, it would be somewhat relevant. And it did. It turned out to be.
Yeah. And I mean, as you know, I went down a similar journey because initially I was a psychology major. I love psychology, right? I like talking about it. I like learning about it. But at that same time, all I knew was I wanted to make money, right? And, lesson learned, life isn't all about money. But when you're 18, 19, you're like, oh, man, I just want to make money. What do I need to do to do that?
Exactly.
And for me, similar to you, I just said, okay, well, I need to get some sort of degree in business, whether it's marketing, sales, business, or economics, which is what I landed on. And again, but unapologetically, I literally did it purely for money. And hey, I learned a ton about the economy, about how finances work, about how business is done. So I'm glad I did it. And, if I had a psychology degree, would it have allowed me to get into the same sales opportunities? I actually don't think so. So I'm glad I did it. But, it just, to your point, you stumble into it, and that's completely okay. And we know other people who, like even Ruby, our sister, she got a degree in earth science, in
like geology or something,
right? And she does business.
She's a product manager.
Yeah, she does product, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, a lot of lessons learned from her. I hope to do an episode with her, but yeah, just wrapping up on that point is it doesn't necessarily, it's inevitable that you'll change your mind, that you will tweak your mission in life. But what's important is that you do the experiences, you have the experiences, so you can actually learn what you like and don't like about yourself.
Yes, but it starts with getting the experience. And I will add to that, because I didn't mention it as a top thing, but I also wanted to make money. Like full transparency, right? Like I'm in sales. Like if I don't want to make money, I'm in the wrong fucking career, right? Like, so I did want to make money, and that's why I chose marketing, was because, I thought, well, maybe I want to be a personal trainer. Well, maybe I want to do this and that. But I realized okay, well, what kind of life do I want to live later? How difficult will it be for me to get to the pay range that's going to allow me the luxury of living the life that I want to live? Not everybody wants to live the same life. I don't need to live in a $10 million mansion, but I'd like to live in a pretty nice home. So you pick and choose, what is that end goal that you want? And then what is my most feasible path to get there? So when I thought about marketing, it had a lot of the things I wanted to do, go talk to people, go be in person, work on business. But it also had a feasible path to making a sizable amount of money, to where then I could live the life I wanted to live. So I wanted to double down on that, because I don't think that anybody should shy away from saying, I want to make money, and that's a reason for me doing what I want to do. I think the key is understand it's a factor, but it isn't everything.
Exactly.
Unless you're an investment banker, then hell yeah, it's everything, and fuck yeah, they make a lot of money.
Yeah. But I think if you're young, if you're young, it's a good motivator.
Yeah,
I think you'll learn whether you achieve it or you don't. You'll learn that it's not everything, but if it gets you to be productive, and I think we come from our parents didn't have a lot of money growing up, and they were also feeding 6 freaking kids.
I like to say
maybe
we
not
weren't
my choice.
We weren't rich, but we weren't poor.
Oh, exactly. We never starved. We always had enough food to eat. But really. Fortunately for me, when I graduated, I basically had $0 in my pocket and I had $0 in debt. Thank God.
Neutral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
same. Thank God.
And our parents were basically just okay, do something with that. Make sure you're, don't just hang out. Life isn't about pleasure. Life's about, but working hard and finding purpose.
Correct.
And I will say that my most fulfilled years are when I'm productive, I'm busy, I'm doing things, I'm producing, I'm creating.
Yeah.
But
we didn't get there by luck as well. There's something to be said about that. We didn't walk out of college with $0 in the pocket and $0 in debt by luck. We were very fortunate that our parents were able to support. We lived at home during college. All 4 years we lived at home. All 4 years you and I had full-time jobs throughout school.
Yeah.
You and I used to carpool to the downtown office. We put our school schedules so in line so that you and I could carpool to our jobs the other day so we could work those hours.
Yeah.
And yes, we were very fortunate that we didn't have to take on debt to buy books and take on debt to pay for certain things with school, but we also were very, very frugal and very smart about the decisions that we made, understanding delayed gratification.
Yes.
Like I would have loved every Thursday night in college, all of our friends would go party because that's the last day of classes. Everyone's going and messing around. You and I had work at 7 a.m. Friday morning. So we gave up the chance to go. And it's funny even saying that, but it's like, because now it's like, yeah, hell yeah, that's the right choice. But at the time you're like, oh, fear of missing out. All my friends are going and doing this. And it's like, pick and choose what matters most. Pick and choose the right decision. And in the end, it'll be worth it, right? And that is what you want to do, is you want to choose a life where you're doing the things that you know are worth it. Even if it's not the easiest thing, even if it's not the most fun, it's the right thing for what you want. Doesn't have to be right for anybody else, but it was right for us. And we're in a pretty good spot now because of the decisions that we made, and nobody does it on their own, but you got to make the right decisions to keep going, right?
Yeah. And you and I are very open about how grateful we are for the job that we had in college, which I want to talk about.
Absolutely.
It was awesome.
It was a freaking blast.
Long story short, our dad was a retired prosecutor. He had some connections at the local DA's office, district attorney's office. And they had a student worker program where there was a wide variety of jobs, right? There was some doing very basic copying papers, printing things, organizing things. But they were employing 18-year-olds. Like, hey, fresh out of high school, as long as you are a full-time student, you can work as a student worker.
Correct.
And there's two major benefits to that, or at least that I'm, thinking of. One, we were in a office. We were in a professional environment with adults treating us, even though we're some goofy little kids, treating us with respect, treating us professionally. And in return, we had to get our shit together, learn how to be articulate, learn how to be professional. And we weren't even doing a paper pushing job. I mean, we had the benefit of working on the facilities team where we were literally moving boxes, moving furniture, driving around with other guys in a van and, it was probably one of the most fun times of my life. I mean, absolutely.
It's one of my favorite jobs ever.
Exactly. And, so like walk me through, like, what was your experience? Because fortunately, you being 1 year older than me, I got to watch, hurdles that you had to jump over and I got to avoid them, thankfully.
Yeah.
But you got to the DA's office a year before me. And, what was that experience like for you? Walk me through kind of what stands out.
Yeah. And, I love thinking back to this because it wasn't always straightforward, right? Right out of high school, 2 weeks after high school was done. So just graduated, right? You got the world ahead of you. 2 weeks after high school was done, I started working full-time at the district attorney's office. Fully acknowledged that I was very fortunate that our dad was able to provide us with the opportunity to earn that job. I'm going to say that carefully, right? So you still got to interview, do your background check, make sure you're not an asshole, do things like that. And so
get a high enough GPA.
You have to have a high enough GPA, which was a very pivotal thing for me, and I'll explain that.
Hey, same here.
Yeah,
at least one semester.
So I started working there right out of high school. I was working full time that summer between high school and college. Yes, it was great to have a full-time job. I started learning responsibility, but there were other factors to that led me to the journey that I had to go through, which were those hurdles. So I basically, when I was picking classes for my first semester, I was working full-time at the DA's office, and I was just kind of like, oh yeah, I'll just pick some classes. Like I'm working here, like I'll focus on making some money, and I'll pick my classes whenever. But what I didn't realize was that I was setting myself up for my first semester of hell, because I was going to reduce my hours from 40 to about 30. And then in doing so, I needed to do school full time. So that was part of the criteria to work there is you must be a full-time student. You must maintain a 2.5 GPA, right? Because you're a student worker. You can't just be a worker. Mm-hmm. And so when I picked my classes for the first semester, I picked to have class every day of the week and also work every day of the week. Poor choice, because you only have a lot of commuting and you only have so many hours a day. So I'll briefly share this because it's not the most important detail, but basically what ended up happening was my first semester of college, I had at least 1 to 2 classes every day, some 2 to 3. But I would basically drive 30 minutes from our home to San Diego State Park, walk to class, do my 2 or 3 classes, hop on the trolley, take the trolley 30 minutes to downtown, work 5 to 6 hours, and then trolley back 30 minutes, walk to my car, and then drive 30 minutes home. So I had a total of a 2-hour commute every day my first semester of college, and I'm 18.
Yeah.
I don't know shit about life yet.
Less time for studying, fun, less time for leisure.
Yes, my world drastically changed in a shorter period of time, and so that was tough. I will be fully open about it. I didn't do well, right? Like I didn't handle it well because that is a big change. At the time, I was trying to figure out like, what kind of life do I want to live with my friends? At the time, I was beginning to date the girl that I was dating, and so I was spending a lot of time there and my studies. So there's that old analogy of like the pyramid of you have your social life, your work life, and what is it? Your school, school, social, and work. Pick two, but you can't do all three effectively, right? And so I didn't do two of them effectively, right? So basically what happened was my first semester, and I wasn't in facilities at this time, so I want to say that as well. I was working as one of the paper pushers in one of the other departments. I was like taking cars to the car wash and like, getting them washed because you got to find random jobs for the kids to do. And so basically during that time, I struggled. I wasn't sleeping a lot. My grades were starting to suffer. I left high school with a 3.8. Never got anything lower than a C+ in my entire school. I did, competitive sports, whatever. First semester of college, I ended that first semester with a 2.1 GPA. I failed a class for the first time ever in my life. It was devastating. I was like at my lowest point because I had no energy. Everything seemed like it was failing. I like
dealing with that
transition, dealing with everything, trying to, all my friends are living on campus. All my friends are getting into, their groups and clubs and stuff. I was only on campus for school, and then I dipped the heck out to go work.
Yeah.
And I knew that was the right choice. I knew that that's what I wanted for myself, but I wasn't balancing it right. And so what happened was at the end of that semester, I was like, holy crap. And, prior to even finishing the semester, I was like, okay, I'm either going to need to drop out of San Diego State. I'm going to need to go to community college, maybe get my shit together. I went to a few military booths because I was considering, well, maybe I should join the military. Like maybe school's not for me. Like maybe I need discipline. I need structure that I clearly can't figure out myself.
Yeah. And the
benefits of the military, obviously great benefits, right? And it's a great choice if you don't know what you want to do. But what happened, and I will never, ever forget this, and this was, you talk about how everybody who's successful now has that kind of, I don't know if rock bottom is the right term, but has that turning point where they say, okay, I can either let the world crush me or I can do something about it. And so at the end of that semester, I had to go to HR at the DA's office and say, hey, I didn't get the 2.5 GPA. And I was telling the guy, Kevin, I'll leave his last name out. I will never forget him, Kevin. I was telling HR, Kevin, because we hung out, we had lunch together, whatever.
Saved my butt one
Save his, hey,
thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And so I had this conversation with him. I was like, dude, I'm sorry. I didn't get a 2.5. Like school has been insane this year. Like I don't even know if I'm going to stay in school. Like it's just, I don't know if I'm cut out for it. And he looked at me and he said, why did you have a tough time this semester? And I said, well, I'm working a lot, trying to balance my social life. Like I'm spending time with this and that. I'm trying to do school. I want to get through. I just quit kinesiology. I'm trying to figure out what the heck I want to do. So I'm trying to get all these things, but and school is expensive. Yeah. It's like, we're trying to keep costs low. School cost is racking up. And it's like, okay. He was like, let me tell you this. The minimum GPA to work here as a student worker is not actually 2.5. It's 2.0. So you coming in at a 2.1, technically speaking, I can give you another semester to turn things around. And he looked at me and he went, are you going to turn things around? And I was like, yes. Are you kidding me? Like, I was like, I thought I was going to lose my job.
Yeah, you're walking in there.
Yeah,
like,
I was walking in there with my tail between my legs to say, dude, I'm not cut out for real life. Like I'm not cut out to do this, right? And he looked me in the eye as an adult. I'm an 18-year-old kid, and sure, I had my fair share of weekends I went drinking and stuff like that, right? But he looked me in the eye as an adult and said, look, if you promise me that you turn things around, that this semester is going to be different, I'm going to keep you on the books and I'm going to give you one more chance. Because this job was a dream, right? Like you have great consistent hours. Like it's not all hour. It's predictable, so I can do my schedule. So I was like, Kevin, yes, I'm going to turn things around. And I left that office, like I had kind of tears in my eyes. I'll openly admit that I had tears in my eyes when I was leaving that office because I was just handed a second chance that I didn't deserve. At least I didn't think I deserved.
Yeah.
That's the key. But that day changed it for me because I realized the world is not going to stop for anybody. If you want something in life, it's up to you to make it happen. And, we can get lucky that there are guardian angels out there that may do things for us, but nobody in life is going to guarantee your success except for yourself. So for the following semester, I changed everything. I grouped all of my classes so that Tuesday, Thursday was the days that I went to school. All of my classes on those 2 days, I went to school, were there for a shitload of hours, went to class, did my studying, and on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I did all of my hours at work. That made it so I minimized my commute to 30 minutes each way once a day. So even that, giving me that time back was great. By grouping together all my classes, I started spending more time actively focused on school because my mind was locked into school all day those days. When I wasn't in class, straight to the fucking library because I needed to get my shit done because I knew the consequence of what was going to happen if I didn't. If I didn't do my studies in those hours between classes, if I didn't get it done, I'd have to go home. And I knew that I couldn't study very well at home. I knew that I just wasn't going to be able to be locked in. So there would be multiple days where I'd stay in the library until like 10 p.m. because it's like, if I leave, I'm not going to do it. So you learn it's up to me to make it happen, and I have to do the things that are necessary to make it happen. So for the rest of college, no details needed there. I turned my shit around. I took ownership. That was the biggest thing I learned is you got to take ownership. I had a great time because I moved apartments to facilities. That's where you and I got to work together, learn great skills, right? Like we're pretty handy. We hang all our own shit, like try to solve our own problems. And I learned how to balance life. And that was the biggest takeaway was learning how to balance what's important and cut out the stuff that's not important, right? Like cut out trying to make every party, cut out trying to build every friend or whatnot. It's like, I love people, but I don't have time for everything. So you pick and choose what matters most for you. Even if it's not the most fun, you do it for the delayed gratification. I left college, my final semester, all A's my final semester. That was the first semester and only semester of school ever that I got all A's. But that's because my last semester of school, I said, this is on me. Yeah. Like, I am going to make this fucking happen because nobody's going to do this for me. Nobody's going to make this happen. I need to take this shit seriously and prove that I deserve to go get a job and I deserve to be working in the industry that I want. I'm not going to leave the world to decide what job that I get to have when, the slim pickings left after the go-getters got to choose their job. Yeah. No. I choose the job that I want. I choose the career that I want. And sure enough, I did multiple internships by the end. We found our love in sales. Before I left college, I had signed my offer. I signed my offer for my first sales job at the number one most innovative company that year in software.
Hard to get
into. I beat out 100 applicants, they told me. I was the only one that was fresh out of college that year. The rest already had a couple years of experience.
Yeah, I didn't get in. I
tried to help you there. But different times. But at the end of the day, it's like I turned my shit around from failing my first semester, thinking I was going to drop out of school, thinking I was going to lose my job, thinking I was going to lose all my friends. And the final semester of college, I got all A's. I worked all those hours full time. I had friends for life. And I had a job at the company that I wanted to work for because I worked my fucking ass off to get it. Nobody was going to do it for me. And that was the biggest takeaway. You learn accountability, ownership.
Yeah. And it's funny because I know we always talk about this, and this is a theory of mine, but I feel like every human almost has to taste that rock bottom, their own version of rock bottom. And from there, it's like, okay, hey, it's only up from here. It's literally only up from here. And whether you're in a situation like yours, or even, and I did a interview with our mom, on her refugee journey, literally fleeing a communist country on a boat. Yeah. And, when I was asking her towards the end, hey, how did you? You went through some horrible tragedies. How did you get yourself through that? Yeah. And she said, well, the only thing I can do is focus on surviving. The only thing I can do is focus on doing this and that. Yep. Like, hey, I'm not going to sit here and say I was a victim, maybe more of a survivor, but regardless of the situation you're in, you have to own your shit and take yourself out of it. Your own successes and failures are due to your own, actions and all that stuff.
It's in your hands.
It's just, exactly, yeah.
It's in your hands. And I have to say, like, that is the biggest thing is you can sit around saying, oh, well, this person has it easier than me. Oh, this, oh, well, that's difficult or whatnot. But it's like, okay, now what, right? Like, what do you want? Are you going to go get that, or are you going to sit around and wait till somebody hands you shit? And it's like, the way I truly think about it is like, it gives you perspective, right? Because like going through that time where I was pretty much going to drop out of everything, I was definitely depressed during that time. Like, talked to a doctor, I had medicine to try to help me through it. But you get to the point where you get perspective too. You say, what the fuck am I complaining about? Like, our mom, and I truly am grateful that our mom is who she is. She's the strongest person I know. I fully admit that. Like, and it gives you perspective, because I thought, wow, okay, I can't deal with a 2-hour commute. I can't deal with like struggling through grades and whatnot. I can't figure that shit out. Mom, at 24 years old, left her entire world, left everything she knew to go to a country she knew nothing about, a language that she didn't speak, for a better life. And I'm going to sit here and complain that I can't do my studies and I can't work at the same time and get my shit done? No. And as soon as you have that thought perspective, you realize like, okay, so what if other people have different things? We talk about the rat race in life. Some people start at a higher place than we do. So what? Understand where you are and what are you going to do to get yourself to the next step. And at the end of the day, acknowledge that it is completely up to you, right? Like, what I had to go through, not even close to as difficult what other kids in college had to go through, not even close to what our mom had to go through. So, it really is about perspective, and it's ownership. It's perspective and ownership. And as soon as you master those two, and mastering takes a long time, right? Like, I'm working on it as well. Like, and
it never ends.
And it never ends, right? You have to remember, there's no finish line. Like, you don't finish, you don't win life, right? You keep working to get what you want. So you got to have the ownership. You got to have the perspective to understand where you are. Then you got to have the ownership to go get what you want. And that has been the biggest thing that has driven us to be where we are. We're well ahead of where we could be at our age. And I fully attribute those two attributes to us being where we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're very open about how grateful we are for both of our parents, and the humble beginnings that they came from, and all the work and sacrifices that they did for us. And on top of that, I'm a huge advocate, regardless of what career you're in, regardless of what topic we're talking about, is finding a mentor. And, I would give my life to the mentors that, gave us the opportunity and took the time to share experiences with us and even give us a shot, at Jay-Z, a mentor that we've known since, I was in college when I think I met him, but, we built a good relationship with him. He taught us a lot, and eventually, I guess he liked us enough to give us the opportunity for employment. And eventually he employed us, which I just thought was a cool story. But not only am I talking about Jay-Z, but Chrisman, Ryan, Tao, all these people who, look at these goofy, young kids who had some energy. I'll give us that. But, they gave us the time of day to teach us, hey, here's what I would do differently. Hey, if I were in your shoes, here's what I would do. So maybe walk us through why you're grateful for mentors and what that's done for your life.
Yeah. And the common denominator to start off between everything that every mentor has ever given me, ever given you, ever given us, perspective. Yeah. They gave us perspective. Why I'm grateful is because you don't know what you don't know. And so as a 22-year-old kid, I was starting out in my first job in sales. I didn't know shit. Like this was right after we had just done 4 years in facilities. So I didn't know anything about software. I couldn't tell you. I used to have to walk to the IT department of our job when we were in facilities to say, hey, I can't figure out how to connect my Wi-Fi. Yeah. Like I shit you not. Right. And so when I got into that job, Jay-Z, who we talk about, he's our shared mentor. It was customary that for every new employee at the company that I was at, they would send their employees to the headquarters for half a week, and everybody would be part of the onboarding, right? Where they teach you about the culture, teach you about the company, kind of get some skills to learn, like, what the heck are we talking about? Because we're about to bang the phones 8 hours a day. And I met this guy because I saw him, and he was enigmatic, right? He just like there was something about him that I was like, I can't place my finger on it, right? Like he was articulate, he was well spoken, he seemed to be friends with everybody, even though he just met everybody.
Yeah.
He knew where he needed to be and what he needed to do.
Yeah.
Well dressed, right? It's like, tooting his horn aside, I walked up to him and I said, hey dude, like I'm fresh out of college. This is my first job. Like, I love sales. Like this is what I want to do. Like, I really like the way you're talking. I really like the way that you're going about things. Like, can we talk? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I met him in the hotel after, but prior to meeting him in the hotel that we were all staying at the bar, I pulled up his LinkedIn, and funny enough, he was connected to our sister, Tao. And so when I met him, I was like, hey, we have somebody in common. It's Tao. And he's like, how do you know Tao? And I was like, Tao's my sister. He's like, get out of here. He's like, Tao was my customer. I sold to Tao for years. I know her very well. And I was like, what the heck? So immediately right off the bat, because of the fact that I went out of my way to ask him for his time and talk to him, and B, brought up a relevant relationship, we began our relationship, right? It doesn't take much. And you later learn that most mentors in life, they get nothing out of it except for the fulfillment of being a mentor. We're now mentors. And so you get fulfillment. So that began our relationship. And to this day, 5 years later, we still talk to him all the time. And of course, as you alluded to earlier, after a couple of years of us in our own jobs, he eventually picked us from our jobs and gave us an opportunity, gave us jobs at the company that he was working at. Pays off. So, but the key thing is why I appreciate them, to circle it back to the beginning, is because it's priceless. Perspective is priceless. I didn't know shit about sales. I didn't know shit about technology. I didn't know how to act. And so by talking to this guy, he spent time after work. I'll never forget. It'd be 5:30 p.m. in the sea of cubes in my office. Everyone's gone. This guy somewhere else in California would get on a phone call with me and talk to me for an hour, and we would take notes. He's a busy guy. Yeah. This guy is a busy guy, and he would spend an hour talking to me, just helping. Hey, here's the way that you need to act. Here's methodologies that you need to employ. Do you read? Go read, dude. Like if you're not good at reading, like pick up a news article, just start practicing reading. And that's really what I did. I started easy. So after a while I asked him, like, why are you talking to me? Like, why are you giving me this much time? I really appreciate it. Like, you don't have to do this. He's like, dude, because I get fulfillment out of this, like, because I want to. And I'm sure, he'll share the same story. So anyways, that is a very detailed version of what I love about mentors is they don't do it for money. They don't do it for, anything, they do it because they want to help the next generation of people. And I have to think that they see a little bit of themselves in the people that are mentees and the people that are asking them for the time. They don't do it for everybody. Just like myself now, I'm a mentor. I don't give everybody my time. Yeah. But what I always tell folks, and it cracks them up, but I say it because I'm a very straightforward person, is I give you my time if you give a fuck. Yeah. If you give a fuck, I will give you my time. And so with Tao, our sister, with Ryan, our brother-in-law, anybody that has ever given us time, I can't thank them enough. And I think that's a really important thing for any young individual, any individual in general, is appreciate and acknowledge those that have helped you get there, and understand that you don't have to know everything. Find somebody that has done what you want to do. Find somebody that's been successful. Go talk to them. Ask them how they did it, because more often than not, there's a path to doing it, and you never would have thought of it yourself, right? At 27 years old, I am a solution consultant, again, with a marketing degree, coming from a guy who didn't know how to connect the Wi-Fi on his phone at 20, to now I'm selling multi-million-dollar deals to large corporations because I got mentors in everything. I built relationships, got mentors in everything, learned how they did it. And it's not, here's the script, go do it, you're guaranteed success. You got to take what they share with you and make it your own, and you find your path. But you do it by starting out by asking somebody for their time. Being a sponge, right? Never stop learning.
You're not done learning.
There is no winning. There is no winning. You must continue to learn, like whatever it is you want to do. And don't ever think that life at some point is just going to say, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
No.
And I've mentioned this on previous interviews, but my rule of advice for anyone looking to grow, whether you're in fitness, whether you are getting into sales, whether you want to be an accountant, a police officer, whatever, find two mentors.
Yeah.
One who is a year, 2 years older than you because they just went through what you're going through, applications, how do I network, how do I do this? And then find someone who's, let's say, 20 years older than you, someone who's been in the industry, someone who, has seen bullshit before and has wisdom to offer.
They've seen the changes.
Exactly. And that's something that, even, like I learned a lot from you. You've introduced me to Sam Wicklin, who taught me a lot early in my career, So and those guys are a couple years older, right? Compared to someone like Jay-Z's, 20 years older, right? And there's other mentors that we've met who are, or more, 20 or more. But yeah, so number one rule, or number one piece of advice from me, as always, find a mentor.
Yep.
Even if you're trying to get fit, if you want to lose 100 pounds, find someone who freaking did it and then ask them how they did it. Diet, workout routine, accountability buddy, whatever it is. So that's just a major takeaway. And I guess as we wrap up on the interview, there's two questions I like to pose to my guests. So the first one being, because part of the podcast is bringing together Americans, right? We're all American, doesn't matter your skin color, religion, whatever. We're all American. We have a stake in what the future of America looks like. So, posing this to you, what would you love to see for the future of America, call it 5-10 years from now?
I guess any additional context on that as to what you're looking for? Because I can answer in many different ways.
Yeah. I mean, and that's it's supposed to be broad on purpose. But let's say, like when I spoke to Josh last week, he was saying that he wants to see more kids off of screens, right? He likes being fit. He's a fitness maniac, as we know. And he always encourages people to get into fitness, whether that is lifting or just cardio. But he's like, hey, socialize. Yes, you can socialize through video games, but it's not super healthy to be behind screens all the time. Yeah. So that was just something that came up for him.
Okay, yeah. And that helps provide some context. When I think about it, and I'm pausing because there's so many things that obviously I'd love to see, but I want to share the biggest thing that I'd love to see in the next 5 to 10 years from the next generation we're talking about, from the next generation, ownership. You look at it, and it's funny, I'll allude to what Josh was sharing, right? Like kids these days, whether they know it or not, grew up in a world where they're kind of told how to think, right? I work in technology. I'm very, very aware. I'm on the back end side of things from time to time, so I know exactly what the strategy is behind this technology. I know that, just remember, like if you're not paying for something, you're being sold, right? Yeah. Like your data is being sold if you're on social media. But the biggest thing is ownership, and I say that because when we were younger, right? And not all of our friends did this, right? I want to start out like not everybody is like us, and they don't have to be, right? You can take different paths in life. You don't have to take the same path, but take ownership in what it is that you want to do, right? If you think that you want to be a millionaire, you think that you want to be famous, right? And you think you want to be this and that. Number one is, why do you want that, right? So why do you want that? And number two is, what are you going to do to get it, right? So take ownership in if you want a career, if you want a job, if you want something, go, like we talked about, talk to somebody who's done it. Go talk to somebody about how they did it. Don't expect that anybody is going to do anything for you in this world, because at the end of the day, nobody has to do anything for you. Nobody's going to do anything for you. If people do, thank them. Yeah. If people do things for you, consider yourself lucky, but don't expect anybody to get you to where you want to be or to provide you the template or answer to get there. You must take the ownership and do it on your own. Find out what it is that you want to have, what it is you want to get, and then find the way to get there and have the discipline to stick to it. It's not always going to be easy, but I always like to say I don't want an easy life. I want a good life. Yeah. And so to get to a good life, sometimes you got to struggle. Sometimes you got to do difficult things, and you're not always going to win every step of the way. You're going to have losses. You're going to fail. Do not be afraid to fail. Look at failures as part of the process to getting to what you want. You must own it. So I'd say that's my biggest thing.
Yeah, and I know I mentioned this a lot, but whether it was you who recommended it to me or Jay-Z, but the book How Champions Think, right?
Jay-Z recommended it to me, and
Exactly.
I recommended it to you.
So, but which I recommend
freaking
everyone.
I would
It's
recommend
awesome.
that to everybody, even if I don't like golf. There's a lot of golf analogies, but
There is, yeah.
look at the takeaways, right? Don't look at what's being said. Look at the message being shared, which is another huge thing I want the future to do. Stop looking at the words that people are saying.
Yeah.
Listen
Think
to the
for yourself.
message. Yeah,
Yeah.
think for yourself. Look at the message. Think for yourself. But
Yeah, and why I brought up How Champions Think is because the advice that you gave was very similar to the advice that Adriana gave. And Adriana was interviewed too. She's a professional athlete. She is on the USA women's tackle football team. So it's like, but the why I bring that up is because you both have found success in your own ways, yet offer very similar advice to kids where it's like, you're not going to be given anything in life. You have to literally work for it and take it yourself.
Yep.
And why I bring up How Champions Think is because that book was written by a sports psychologist who will compare the common denominators between successful business folk and successful athletes. And there are a lot of commonalities.
and a lot of both too.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the main reasons I started this podcast is because it's like, hey, we all found success in our own ways, but there are common denominators between it. Ownership being one of the biggest ones that, that helps people it's a controllable that you can get better at. We're not all perfect at it, but if you can get good at that, you will already start to see upward mobility.
Yep. And you will be happier. Like that's probably the last takeaway I can give is
You're living life. Life isn't happening to you.
life is not happening to you. You are taking control of your life, right? Like think of life as a wave, right? Do you want to just be, the wave is going to come. The wave is coming. So are you going to get crashed and fumble under the wave?
Yeah.
Or are you going to harness that wave and make something beautiful? Are you going to make something that you want? And if you live your life like that, you are also, as another benefit, going to be happier because you're living a life that's fulfilled.
Yeah.
You're living a life where you're controlling what it is you want and you're making something of life. Life's going to happen, so make something of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's a good place to stop. For those who tuned in, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the time of my guest and brother, David. If anyone has any interest in sales, I'm always an open book. David's an open book and a great resource. So any questions or anything, feel free to ping them either in the comments or DM. I'm still getting used to managing a YouTube channel, but yeah, appreciate your time.
Yeah, anytime.
Sweet.